What is going on, y'all? KMBest here, joined by Lamby series. We are 8 Cubes. We talk about the 8 most important things in Marvel Snap, and with the release of High Voltage Overdrive today, alongside Nightmare tomorrow, there are many cards to discuss. We're going to start with Nightmare, then move into the cards available in High Voltage Overdrive before talking about High Voltage Overdrive itself as a game mode, the current metagame, and how those 3 cards releasing could change it. This is a week I expect to be sort of a smaller version of the first week of the season when like 6 cards came out and it was like, oh my god, what is actually happening here? So let's start with Nightmare, a 3-1 that changes the abilities of all the cards in your hand to another random ability of a card at the same cost, which is a really interesting thing to do in the context of a Sauron deck already being a fairly strong thing. I think the ability Nightmare has is good, but the stats it has are bad enough that it might push it out of the Sauron deck.
Yeah, so the thing about Nightmare as a card is that it's one of those 8-cuber potential cards. Like, I mean, the text. Basically, what it does is like it just gives you a bunch of random effects. It just swaps out your effects effects of cards in your hand to random ones, and then sometimes you just get a game-winning effect. Like you get a game-winning effect on your final turn play, which obviously no one can ever play around because it's completely random, right? So this is what it has going for it. But what it doesn't have going for it is that is getting randomly sometimes potentially good effects worth playing a 3-1? Like 3-1 is effectively not playing turn 3, right? No, it's actually like regressing.
Yeah.
If you think about it, yeah, it's actually regressing. So you kind of, if you do play this card, it's like playing this card, saying you skip a turn, sort of, and then hoping the rest of your cards in your hand can carry with their random effects. So, like, honestly, the stat line of this card is the main reason why I don't think it will see play. Like, can you imagine if this had like copycat stat lines? I use copycat because copycat also does the random thing, on the card text. Like, if this had copycat stat line or like 3-4, you'd probably splash this in very many random places, and it could get you your 8 cubes very often. But no, it's a 3-1.
It was data mined at 2-2. And I think at 2-2, it's like very obviously messed up in a way that will make people mad, right? Like, if this card is good, it is a fusion between the snap equity of Mr. Negative and the lack of knowledge you have about what your opponent is doing of a, like, Pixie or something along those lines. Or, God forbid, an Arashem, right? Like, this card had the potential to be the most hated card in Marvel Snap, I think. Yeah. And I think right now, with what its stats are, it's going to be a fairly mediocre thing that if you want that specific gameplay experience for, you're going to have to pay to get it. In the sense of, like, this will probably not be a top deck in the meta, but you're still going to be able to blow people out if you pull it off and you get your, like, Typhoid Mary with upside, Red Skull with upside, and things of that nature, right? Like, that kind of stuff, there's obviously still strong stuff in here. Like, turning Red Skull into, an Iron Man. Turning the Infinite into Galactus, right? But it's bad enough on stats that it's probably not going to be a major metagame player, which is kind of exactly where you want a card like this to hit if you want the metagame to be full of play patterns that aren't terrible and awful.
Yeah, I feel like this card is releasing at 3-1 just so it can exist. I don't think it's... I mean, the stat line is really gonna stop like 99% of people from actually playing this card, I feel. Because like, I'm a big fan of random generation and RNG to a certain extent, but obviously within a controlled space, I feel like this card, if it had decent stats, would be above my threshold for RNG that I would like even in a game like Marvel Snap, because like being able to play this for like, assuming it's good stats, and then you get random cards that like could potentially win, is even above Arishem level of randomness, right? Because Arishem's downside actually puts like cards in your deck, so it makes your deck inconsistent. But this deck you can play this in a 12 card deck, but so that's why I good thing it's a 3-1.
Kid Omega is, in my opinion, the scariest card releasing in this group of cards, and he'll be out probably by the time this video comes out. This is a 2-1 with an activate ability that destroys the next card you play and gives Kid Omega its power. Now, I want to be clear. I don't think that this card is generically strong. I don't think that this card is strong the way a Copycat is strong. I think this card is potentially strong the way a Hela is strong. I think this card is the kind of card that could take a deck like Nimrod well over the top, that could take a Phoenix Force deck well over the top, because it is a card they can play on 2 and then bank the destroy until later when they actually need it. Right now, the metagame is very mid-rangey. People are playing a lot of Cannonball Mercury, they're playing a lot of Annihilus, they're playing a lot of Shang-Chi. One thing that is very good into mid-range metagames is just going over the top of them in non-interactive ways. That is what this card is built to do. This card is built to, you play it in whatever lane, you play Nimrod in some other lane, you blow up the Nimrod, you presumably have buffed the Nimrod with a Galacta or a Shuri or something. Kid Omega gets 9 or 12 points of power. The Nimrod splits into 2, and then you keep making Nimrods. And I don't know a mid-range deck that can compete with that. You just get stat checked by it. If there is a worry about what this card can do, I think for me it is very strongly the worry is it makes Nimrod the new Hela, a consistent mid-range crusher.
Yeah, I'm a super not fan of that whole Nimrod thing. Like I've lived through multiple Nimrod metas already, and I never really liked playing against that kind of thing. But I guess we talk about the positives of this card. For sure, this card at 2/1, very splashable in destroy decks. The cool thing about this with Nimrod is that you kind of just like literally get a free, like it's just another Nimrod destroy turn, right? Because you pop the Nimrod on 5. Right, usually when it comes to Nimrod, you don't pop it until 6, but now you pop it on 5, then you can pop it on 6 again, which also kind of means that the deck itself is very. When someone snaps you, you probably can just stay, because if you hit the nuts, you just win, and then you snap back, and then you win super hard. So this is that deck. Like we've talked about this style of like Nimrod deck for a long time, but this card would probably make that better. But I think one more thing to talk about when it comes to Kid Omega is like for generic destroy decks, right? Normally, when it comes to destroy, their main problem was you had to kind of draw cards in the correct order, right? You need to draw your X-23s early. You need to draw your Wolverines, Deadpools early. This card kind of lets you. It allows you to draw a bit worse sometimes, because you can have this on the board first, and then you draw the small guys after, and then or at least have a pop for this right now. You know, it's like I think KM mentioned it to me earlier. It was like reverse Venom of sorts, and I think that makes a lot of sense. You know, so this probably brings consistency to destroy decks in general. Whether destroy decks become meta, we'll see.
Yeah, I think like if this only makes destroy decks better, I'm very happy about it. If it ends up making Nimrod decks into a Hela sort of presence in the metagame, because I think people understand, like, I've talked a lot about Hela and why I don't like her in this context before, right? But a lot of that isn't really her fault. It's about the lack of interaction a mid-range deck has with it. It's about the position she takes in a metagame, wherein she says no mid-range decks can exist because they cannot interact with me and they cannot go over me. You can't win. You cannot win this matchup. And Nimrod has a similar thing where it's like, you can maybe Shadow King it, but you can't get rid of it. You can mitigate it, but you cannot actually get rid of it in a meaningful way. Which means that it has similar potential to sit on top of all these mid-range decks and say, you can't exist right now. And I think that is bad, because I think Marvel Snap is at its best when it is some amount of interactive, and decks like this push it into being not interactive at all, just go over the top of each other. Like, oh, you're playing a Nimrod deck? Okay, I'll play a combo deck that plays, like, I'll play Mr. Negative and have multiple Iron Men, and then I'll go over the top of your Nimrod. And it's just like, that's not interacting, that's not fun, that's just two people doing stuff.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, what you're trying to say is just that when decks are completely solitaire, right? Like this Nimrod deck feels borderline solitaire, assuming it's actually good, which is very similar to Hela as well. You just don't care what your opponent is doing, and then you just do your own thing and you win. You know, so I think that's not very good for the game in general. Like people, obviously, it's always better when there's interaction between two players, because that's the point of the card game, right?
Speaking of interaction between two players, I personally have been of the belief that RHM Thanos, not really a problem, doesn't really need a tech card. But in case you don't believe that, there is a tech card coming out for you. The Series 4 in the High Voltage Overdrive shop is Cobra, a 2/3 activate, destroy an opposing created card here. I actually think this card is better than people are giving it credit for. Like, not like it's good or whatever, but like Gorgon is like a nominally playable card. And this is actually pretty similar to Gorgon in my head.
This card, the more I think about it, might be really good right now. As in, obviously, right now specifically because 34 card Monty is a deck, right? And this card is a 2-3 stat line. Firstly, that's not a bad thing. That's a decent thing. Secondly, it's basically Shang-Chi any created card. Well, I say Shang-Chi just because it destroys, right? So the thing about this is it's super flexible. Like even if you pop a random like 4-drop that's randomly generated, you pop a random 3, it's just gone from their board. So I'm just saying that like right now, this card actually will probably see play just because it's Arishem meta because it really just blows up anything. Like at any created card, there's like no restrictions, right? So we keep talking about Arishem, but at any point in time, any created card, like created by locations, created by I don't know, just anything, you just blow it up and it's a 2-3. At worst, if it doesn't work out, you just have some stats on the board. So I think this card is good. I actually think this card can be splashed for now for sure. In the future, if there are more randomly generated decks or whatever, then yeah, it's for sure gonna see play again. So this is, I think, a good tech card just to have in your arsenal because it's probably gonna be relevant always. It's probably gonna be relevant always.
Yeah, I think it's going to be like the 5th or 6th best 2-drop to play at any given time, which means it's not going to make the cut in a lot of decks, but there are going to be situations where you're like, all right, it's time to whip out the Cobra, right? Like, it's not always going to be in anything.
It's time to whip out the Cobra.
Okay, it's not always going to be in anything, right? It's not like Merlin or Kate Bishop where they're like part of your proactive game plan that you're actually trying to do with like your werewolf or whatever. It's going to be something you swap in to deal with certain specific problems. But I do think there's more targets than you think, right? Like this is, the classic Shang-Chi Monster Island snap. This will blow up the monster on Monster Island 2. Let's say your opponent plays a white tiger. This will blow up the tiger. If they Frigga a card in their move bounce deck, this will blow up the Frigga card in the move bounce deck. There's just a bunch of stuff that it seems to randomly hit. I do think it's sort of like a Gorgon type card where it's like, this is not actively bad, it's actually actively good, and the only reason it wouldn't be in your deck is the high level of competition for 2-3 with upside, I think, is the main thing that strikes me. Moving on to the game mode itself, High Voltage Overdrive. Many people have said, delete Arishem and make him a game mode. They're not deleting Arishem, but they are kind of making him a game mode. This is a game mode where you start with 8 extra cards. They are all supercharged or something to that effect. There is additional energy for 4 turns, much like normal High Voltage. And of course, that leaves us with what's the gimmick? Well, the gimmick is, and this is I think probably the most controversial thing about the game mode in my mind. This High Voltage was traditionally like the for fun mode that everyone got to complete, and I think that's why a lot of people liked it. There's a shop attached to it now, similar to the Sanctum shop, and I'm not sure how that will impact people's understanding of the game mode, because I worry that this is a game mode people only liked because it was them getting stuff for free, and they didn't actually like necessarily have an opinion about the game mode itself. Because now the game mode is different, and it's not just a pure free roll anymore. And I think that's notable to me, because I felt like, personally, maybe I'm a little bit too cynical, that almost everyone who said they liked High Voltage did not like High Voltage, they liked getting stuff for free. Again, maybe that's a cynical read on it. Obviously, there are going to be people who really did like it. I do think this game mode is an exciting upgrade to High Voltage. I think it's cool, because personally, I think the High Voltage gameplay itself was quite boring and quite medium. So adding this additional, there's a reactor that does different things to the game when you play 5 of those supercharged cards between you and your opponent. It's cool. There's cool stuff. It's a cooler game mode. There's more diversity now just because there are randomly generated cards in the game mode. I think it will be a more fun experience. But what I worry about is that the experience isn't really why people played or enjoyed High Voltage. They played and or enjoyed High Voltage because they would basically log on, have a second set of dailies to do, and have no punishment for losing while they were doing those dailies. And I think the game really, like, there are a lot of people who play this game who just really don't want to be punished for losing.
Yeah. So the thing about this, the newest high voltage mode, right, Overdrive, it's in terms of the actual game itself, like the mode, I think this for sure for me at least more fun, There's a lot more elements to the game than the previous high voltages. And also, I mean, it's still, to be honest, it's still a for fun game mode because if you look at like whatever they're offering right now, it's actually still a highly uncontrollable environment like for any player who plays this game. There's a lot of like randomly the charged cards are randomly added in your deck. They are drawn randomly. The arc reactor thing also has random effects. Like basically it's all random. The amount of mana you get every turn is also random. So like it's for sure a for fun mode. But the thing is, I think they actually put like decent amount of thought into this deck, into
Yeah.
this mode because it looks decently well thought out in my opinion. And I think in terms of enjoying a new mode, I think people would enjoy it. But like, I get what you're trying to say, right? Some people just want to speed through it and get the card for easy. This is probably going to be a little less easy, less easy than the other high voltage modes. But in terms of like fun to play, I guess you get an hour or two more fun than the previous game mode. Because honestly, yes, high voltage was after a few games, I felt high voltage was just it was fun, but it was like, oh, okay, yeah, mana, that's it. This one at least has like a bit more uncontrolled elements to it, so should be a bit more exciting.
I think it will be a better experience. Like, I want to be clear. I think this is a vastly improved game mode. But I don't think the game mode mattered all that much to why people liked High Voltage.
Correct.
I think people liked High Voltage because of the reward system.
Easy cards.
Yes. Like that's again, maybe I'm just too cynical. Maybe I just don't trust gamers when they say they like something. And like maybe I just assume that gamers are unable to process the reasons they like stuff and they can only like do you know the famous story about MTG Arena where there's like a little smiley face frowny face thing at the end of game and it's like, did you enjoy playing this game? And the number one predictor of whether or not someone would click the smiley face or the frowny face was whether they won or they lost. And so it's like, yes. We are not good at disentangling. I don't even want to say gamers. This is a human thing. We're not good at disentangling our desires and wants from our perception of fun. And I think I worry about that when it comes to this game mode, where I think it's like, this is probably more fun. This is probably a more exciting game mode. But the reward track, which is the part that actually stays with you, is probably harder for people to navigate and less of a free roll. And I kind of think that that will be the overwhelming takeaway from the community because I don't know that people actually loved the gameplay so much as they loved the free stuff.
Yeah, I mean, this next point that I want to make has almost nothing to do with this game mode.
Okay.
But I suddenly thought of this thing whereby a lot because you mentioned the whole smiley face thing, right? I just suddenly recalled whereby a lot of pro gamers, a lot of us, we noticed this thing that people only say GG after they beat you, but when they lose to you, they never say GG. It's very interesting. Like 99% of people I noticed they only say GG when they beat you, but if they lose to you, they never say GG first. It's quite interesting. But obviously that's not a stereotype that fits. I mean, it doesn't fit everybody, but
it's the same sort of thing though, right? Like if you like it's a very human thing. And I think part of what bothers me is I used to be one of those people, right? Like this is why it bothers me so much. Is like, I'd play against what was his name? Asmodai. You remember Asmodai? I'd be like, yo, GG. But when I think back on it, it was only when I won. And that's because that's the only time I would feel good about it, right? Of course, it's natural. Yeah. Like, it's a normal human thing. I don't want to, get on people for that. It's a very normal human thing for you to be happy when you beat someone who, quote unquote, matters. I don't really think that I do, but I, just to use that colloquially, right? Like, oh my God, I'm real. I'm valid. I'm playing against someone who's really good at this game and I beat them. That means I matter, right? And being on the other side of it, it sort of feels like people are showing up to, eat my fingernails. I don't know. I don't know a better way of describing it. So that's what it feels like. And so I don't want to act like this isn't a thing that is this is a thing that's you're bad for doing it or anything like that. It's just that's sort of what it feels like is we're bad at understanding what our own incentives are, I think, a lot of the time.
Yeah. Yeah, I think my point about bringing that up was just it's an ongoing debate whereby when someone says GG or says something to you after a match, is it truly they mean that or do they mean, yeah, bro, I won?
I can tell you for sure that it was, yeah, bro, I won back in the day for me.
Usually it was, yeah, bro, I won, bro.
For sure, dog. Let's talk a little bit about a card Lamby has come up with a thrilling nickname for, the Disappointing One.
Okay, so shout out to my Discord because they sent me this image of the ancient one edited to look very sad and miserable, and they called it the disappointing one. But basically, the ancient one has fallen a little bit flat because I know its effect is powerful. The stat line is fine. I mean, we talked about horrible stat line, aka Nightmare, a bit earlier, right? But the ancient one actually has good stats, and the payoff for playing the ancient one is the mandala, which we talked in the previous episode, like multiple claws, Iron Mans or whatever. It kind of just fell flat, right? Like it's just not doing enough. Is it because the setup is too difficult? The amount of time needed to play this 3-5 in your deck and then play a 3-0, you might as well just be playing other cards like on your other turns in your Victoria hand deck or whatever. Like, what is it actually? What is it that made this card like fall so flat? Because the potential is there, but is it really just because like setting all this up is too much effort, or is it people have barely scratched the surface of what this could potentially be?
I think it's both, but largely it's a competition issue. When you look at the other threes in its range, I think the easiest things to compare it to are Red Guardian and Copycat, right? Mm-hmm. And if you are playing the Ancient One and you end up not playing the Mandala, which is entirely possible because it costs an additional 3, you were better off playing the other cards every single time. And that's a very awkward position to be in, because if you think of the on reveal as an upside that you can get, that's one thing. Because like this card is not making your deck worse by like a massive amount or anything like that. Yeah. It's just like you are playing a card with effectively on reveal, you have the privilege to pay 3 extra energy for this. Whereas with a Copycat, it's just doing what it does. You don't have to do anything later. It just shows up. It's good. It's a 3-5 with upside. Or Red Guardian shows up. It's good. It's a 3-5 with upside. And so you have this thing where it's a good enough card. I don't think the card is bad. It's just the fact that it is split across 2 cards. Its on reveal is effectively the ability to pay energy for an additional effect later rather than just an effect now. I think the card has a pretty high floor on how bad it can be, because it's not going to be that much worse than that stuff in any individual game. But over the course of like 100 games, you'll notice like a couple percentage points difference. And I think that's sort of ultimately where she ends up falling, where it's like, what I like about the card is it's good enough to encourage you to do the cool stuff. The stat line at 3-5, it's good enough for you to try it. It's good enough for you to not feel like it's actively bad. But I don't think it's good enough to displace the cards that have already established themselves. And I think that's ultimately what people are feeling, where they are disappointed that they are unable to displace these cards. And I don't know what it would look like if they could displace these cards. Like, would it have to be like a 0 cost spell? Like, that's kind of what we're talking about. Like, I don't know what it would take for that to actually happen. I think this is about as good as they can do without absolutely breaking the game in half, but that is sort of where I'm at with it. Because, like, it's not like the card is even bad. Like, I've played good decks with this card in it. Like, the Husky Puppies version of this is pretty good. The Derek version of this is pretty good. This is a good card. It's just, like, there are some really elite cards that it's competing with.
Yeah, I mean, like, if you make the spell cost 0, it's effectively like saying it's a 3-5 body that does the effect, right?
Yeah.
So that's a bit too much.
Much stronger, yeah.
Yeah, no, I think the thing that you said that really caught my attention, and I think I want to bring it to the front of this discussion again, is that, like, the downside, the downside is basically you play this 3-5, and then the amount of times you don't actually need to play this 3-0 spell, right? The amount of times you don't actually need to play it is probably the main reason why it's like a bit discouraging to even play this 3-5, because I guess there are many scenarios right now that you don't actually need to set up this 3-0 spell. You know, like, you could just play every other card and then the result is almost similar without having to play the 3-5 into 3-0 and put cards in like a specific place and then like cast it on the final turn and use 3 energy, that kind of thing. So I feel like there's too many things that you could be doing that could replicate the effect of, at least right now, right? Could replicate the effect of casting this mandala, that it doesn't seem to be worth it.
Moving on to a metagame defining Season Pass 2-3. Where have we heard that before? Merlin is an excessively powerful card. I still have him below Old Iron Patriot and Old Sam Wilson, but we don't have Old Iron Patriot and Old Sam Wilson. To quote the great Rick Pitino, a reference I'm 100% sure will be lost on Lamby, Iron Patriot is not walking through that door. Sam Wilson is not walking through that door. We have what we have. And in the context of what we have, Merlin is probably the strongest 2-3 in the game. It's Merlin and Surge for 2-drops, and that's what we're doing. And I think that is sort of a statement that I want to get out there, get on record, and have people sort of acknowledge. Because the synergy with Werewolf by Night is very strong. But more than that, it's just a good enough card at giving you stuff. A 2-3 that creates 1-2 Scarlet Witches is very good. There's downsides. Sometimes your hand fills up. But there's upsides in that it makes it easier to react to downside locations. You flush things away to get energy. You evolve bad things that get put on your board. You transform locations that are bad. Merlin ultimately plays as a bit like a 2-3 Nocturne, where it's just going to make you better into a lot of different small spots. And that utility is just very good when attached to a 2-3 body. That is also sort of not limited. Compared to Cobra, which is only ever going to be more than a 2-3 occasionally, Merlin is going to be always more than a 2-3.
Yeah, circling back to your reference, you lost me at Rick, but everything else I understood. I understood everything else except that. But anyway, so I still rank Merlin higher than pre-nerf like Sam Wilson, except in Thanos decks. In Thanos decks, Sam Wilson is just king. But so I rank Merlin very, very highly because I think right now, if you look at the decks that play this card, which is almost every other deck, as long as your turn 6 is not just strictly playing a 6-drop, you can play Merlin in your deck, like 5+1s, 4+1+1s. And like if my hand fills up with spells and I have 7 cards in hand, I don't really care because they always like kind of fill my curve, because like at the end of the day, it also adds stats to the Merlin. Before turn 5, you get mana, you get energy by getting rid of your smallest card, which can very often be just like a negative power hood or a rock or like whatever, and then you just become a Wiccan deck without playing Wiccan. It's insane, right? So like you said, Surge and this card, I would say best in slot 2s right now. The funny thing is, do you think Surge or Merlin is actually like overall the supreme? Interesting question, right?
I think that Surge is probably a little bit better. And I think that largely because Surge has the more powerful nut draws attached to it, where this is the card that gets you like a Galacta on turn 3. Like that's real. Like if Surge wasn't getting you the 4s on 3, if Surge wasn't doing its second Zabu type thing, which I think was a thing that a lot of people didn't appreciate about Surge before it came out, right? Like a lot of people were like, oh, is this a bounce card? We're going from 1 to 0. Turns out the most valuable thing you can do is just be Zabu 2.
Collector on 3.
Yeah. And I think that like if Surge wasn't doing that, then it probably pretty clearly be Merlin. But Surge doing that just gives it the edge for me right now. So in line with that, like this is a very mid-range soup meta. There's like 4 different decks that are playing like Annihilus Werewolf stuff. It's just like there's the people are playing unironic Yellow Jackets. There's a bunch of Agamotto decks. There's decks that are running around here and doing Cannonball Mercury. There's Elsa decks. There's V-Hand decks. There's so many decks where it's just like I have some strategy to get points, and that strategy to get points is based on whatever linchpin card you choose. Surge and Galactic Gwenpool. That's its own linchpin strategy, right? You have, the Afflict cards. That's a strategy to get points. You have the V-Hand Frigga stuff. That's a strategy to get points. All of that just sort of adds up into a metagame with a lot of diversity. And this is sort of why you see people praising these mid-range metagames is because ultimately when you have these mid-range metagames, there's a lot of different ways to get points and interaction on the board, and so you end up having a lot more decks available. And the reason I bring that up is largely to segue into the next topic, which is what happens if Nimrod takes over this metagame and crushes all of that metagame diversity. But before we do that, I kind of want to get your take on where you want to be at in a mid-range metagame, because I typically think that mid-range metagames sort of naturally push us towards bigger and bigger mid-range decks, until someone manages to go smaller with better effect.
Yeah, so the current state of the game in terms of like mid-range meta is one of the kinds of meta that I love the most right now, whereby there are a lot of point engines, right? Because the thing about these kind of we keep saying mid-range, 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 but essentially what we are saying is that decks that actually talk to each other and fight each other. Like they're not
Yes.
just like do their own thing decks, right? Like the meta is just now filled with like maybe 10 plus different decks that actually play the game with each other, which is very good, right? Like I get to play Zabu Search, discount play early collector, and then it's a points race. Or what other points race I got? Instead of going for like discounts, I go for more energy, bolts of Bolsec, Agamotto, 34 card Monty, things like it's a lot of like I'm playing like scammy cards and I'm putting points, but you're also doing it in a different shape or form. Like for Afflict, for example, it's like reducing your opponent's stuff, which is interaction. So I think the meta right now is really good. Like I love it. Like I like this kind of like whereby players are actually playing with each other and not just like solitaring their own deck like hella. So I mean obviously I enjoy where we're at right now. And usually like you mentioned, which is like you said, it's a really good segue into the next topic because how this balance breaks is like there comes a new Hela, a new hope, a new whatever, a new Hela, basically
Or
a
a
new
new
Hela,
Thanos, right? Like
or a new Thanos, yeah.
what part
I
of
mean,
what made Thanos so good was that it sat on top of all the other mid-range decks because it played a 0/9. It's like, oh,
okay,
okay,
yes,
yeah,
yes.
all right, yeah, like, all
Yeah.
right, cool. Like,
Even back then, right, 2 years ago, it was a 0-12. Scar, it was
yeah,
Scar 11 or 12 back then. But yeah, basically it was Scar before
yeah,
Mockingbird. It was about the same thing. But yeah, so there's currently no mid-range deck that's like completely unfair. Like the level of
yep,
unfairness that every mid-range deck has right now is comparable to the unfairness of the other mid-range decks. Then when you get like more 0-9s or 0-11s, or there was Death with Killmonger back then, there was 0-12s as
yes.
well, yeah. So
You
once you
do
get
you do
that, then you
Death Wave and Thanos.
yeah, there's Death Wave, right? So once you get that, then all the other mid-range decks get put to shame. And
Yep.
then the only thing that beats the 0-9, 0-12s is the tribunal things. And then we shift into the new meta.
So I mean, I guess let's talk about it, right? Because part of why I didn't want to devote a ton of time to talking about the current metagame in this podcast is I am very afraid that Kid Omega takes a huge shit on all of it. Like we're talking about like, oh, look at all these decks that talk to each other and interact, and it's just like, yeah, idiot, what's up? Here's 36 power of Nimrod in every lane. Get out. Like that's my fear.
I might actually like the more I think about it, I feel like there's a very obscenely scary chance that
Yep.
it will do
It's
what you
scary.
said. Because
It's
it's
scary.
so the only interaction you can ever have versus activate cards is Raid Guardian, right? You can't
Yes.
Eng them, you can't Shank them. You literally only can Raid Guardian in activate cards, which is at least good. But the thing is, if you don't have the Raid Guardian, or if it's blocked by something, and then
Yeah.
yeah. So the thing about Nimrod, even without the Kid Omega, was that back then it was what Shuri 4, Nimrod 5, double pop 24, 24 on two sides or something like that. It's very difficult to deal with. Like the only way you really dealt with that was like you just go bigger than those in two locations. Obviously the meta will adapt to that if it comes down to it. But now it's like you pop on 5 and then yeah, it's a lot of points. So
It's a lot of
I don't
points.
know,
Like
man.
you get a free additional boom boom, and Kid Omega gets the power off the Nimrod. So it's just
Yeah.
like you're just sitting there looking at it. It's like, all right. So what happened here is literally I will put 36 points of Nimrod in every lane. Like that's
Actually,
what the
you know
game
what this
plan is
is
right
for
now.
the Nimrod deck? You remember back then some of the Nimrod decks they ran like magic. This is like
Yeah.
doing the extra turn without needing the
Yes.
extra turn because you compress the turns. You go like Kid Omega on 2, then you Galacta or something, then you buff the Nimrod, then Nimrod gets popped. The Kid Omega is like a 2-9, 2-10 or whatever. And then
Yep.
there's like Nimrods on the sides. And then you still have turn 6, by the way. We haven't reached turn 6, guys. That was
Yep.
only turn 5.
And like people are talking about like, oh, I'll just Cosmo it or whatever, right? And it's like, okay, here's the problem. You might be able to Cosmo a Shuri Nimrod. You can't Cosmo a Galacta Nimrod. That could go anywhere, or at least in two locations, right? Like, you can, like, because Kid Omega activates without a requirement that the card be on his own lane. And I think that's sort of ultimately the issue with the card, where it's like, if Kid Omega required you to play it on its lane, I do not think it would make the Nimrod stuff good. I think you'd be able to play armor on that lane, and it would be whatever. Like you'd be able to answer it. There'd be stuff to do.
Small section of my community that will be very happy if this stuff is meta, because I have a very small group of people that are in love with Professor X. That like, can you imagine if Prof X
actually
comes
be time for that? Like we talked about Mercury Cannonball, Professor X. Like that's the kind of like genuinely. That's the last time that was really good was when Hella was really good. Right? Where it's like, like if we got to get toxic, we're going to get toxic about it.
Yeah, man. Like, and you know what was the best thing to do with Professor X? It was always about get prio in one location first, right? What gets prio really quickly? The deck that plays a lot of one drops, Thanos, man. You get Thanos Prof X deck again. We regress.
God.
2 years into the past.
This is what I mean. Like we're in such a good meta, and I'm genuinely afraid that Kid Omega comes out and just like punches that metagame in the face, and it gets really bad. That's my fear. That's where I'm at. That's the final moments of this podcast. Thanks so much for listening and watching. As always, I've been KMBest. He's been Lamby Series, and he's about to take us out.
Like, comment, subscribe, and we'll see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.